The Travel Transformation Podcast is proud to be partnered with Give the Goodness Global, an amazing global outreach project helping families in need all over Southeast Asia and beyond. Please check them out at Instagram.com/Give the Goodness Global today. And now on to the podcast episode.
Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation, exploring the life-changing potential of solo travel, intentional travel, and location-independent working. Whether you're an aspiring digital nomad or simply wish to boost your confidence through epic travel experiences, I'm here to motivate and inspire you to go after all your wildest dreams. I'm Jessica Grace Coleman, author, certified travel coach, founder of the Travel Transformation Company, and your host for the Travel Transformation Podcast. Travel changed my life. Now let's change yours. You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation. My name is Jessica Grace Coleman and I'm your host. And today I'm talking to Kristin Secor, a wheelchair accessible travel blogger and founder of World on Wheels. Kristin was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy, which affects her strength, balance, endurance, and breathing. She doesn't, however, let these challenges hold her back. So far, she has travelled to 20 countries across 4 continents, including Antarctica, and she has a goal to visit all 7 continents by the end of 2026. In this episode, we discuss tips and tricks for accessible travel, Kristin's goal to visit all 7 continents and her trip to Antarctica, her blog and upcoming wheelchair accessible tours, and how travel has challenged her not to make assumptions about what is possible. This was a really inspiring episode, whether you're a wheelchair user or not, so let's get straight to the interview. Hi, Kristin. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Okay, so to start with, please can you give me and our listeners a bit of background info about you? So where you're from, where you are right now, and a little bit of your story so far.
Yeah, so I am in the U.S. I'm from upstate New York. And I was born with a rare form of muscular dystrophy. It affects my breathing, my strength, my endurance, just balance. I do have some mobility, but I have to walk with a cane and holding onto things. When I travel in a wheelchair. Anytime I leave my house, I'm in a wheelchair just for safety. And I used kind of my skills as being someone with a disability, and I became a mental health counselor. I was licensed and worked for 11 years, and then my health worsened and I had to pivot, and now I'm a wheelchair accessible travel blogger.
I love that, and we're going to talk about your blog later on. But there you mentioned your form of muscular dystrophy and how it affects you. So can you go into a bit more specifics about how it affects you when you're traveling? Like what kind of thing do you have to think about before you go, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because it affects my mobility, I have a difficulty. I can't climb stairs. I can walk very, very short distances, and I usually don't when I travel just to conserve energy because I do kind of wear out a lot faster. So I have to really look at what's wheelchair accessible. I have to look at, are the hotels going to be accessible? How am I going to get to point A to point B? And, there's just a lot more thought and planning that goes into it so that I can accommodate my wheelchair and my mobility needs.
And do you find that's getting better as time goes on? Like, are people becoming more aware that they need to be accessible, that kind of thing? Or how have you found that?
Yes and no. So we are certainly better than we were even like 5 or 6 years ago, but there's still a long way to go. There are certain cities that are really good with accessibility, London being one of them, but there are a lot of areas where it's really hard to find accessible transportation, whether it's the public bus or a taxi or, just tours that can accommodate people in wheelchairs. So we definitely need more of that. And there's still, right now, there's a lot of movement in airline travel in the U.S. I'm not sure about in the UK, but in the U.S., we have had an overhaul with recommendations. One of the things they're trying to do is allow wheelchair users to stay in their own wheelchair when flying. Right now, that's not possible. And a lot of wheelchairs get damaged or broken on a daily basis. And then the other thing that in the US they're really moving towards, and this is at the very beginning stages, is having accessible restrooms on a plane. Because right now they're not really truly accessible, and so that means people with mobility problems and wheelchair users have to dehydrate themselves, or they have to hold it or wear diapers, and that's just not fun or dignified for anyone.
No, exactly. And so you mentioned that it's sort of hard to find these places. Do you use any certain websites or tools to try and find them, or is it literally a case of Googling it and like going and investigating every single thing to see if it's accessible?
Googling is my best friend, because sometimes there is information, but so I use a combination of Google and Google Maps, because Google Maps has the street view, so you can look at like entrances. Are there stairs? There may be an alternative entrance, things like that. But yeah, it's a lot of research. When I find companies, a lot of times I have to then email them and say, hey, these are my needs. I have to be very, very specific, because if I just say, hey, is it accessible? They'll say, oh, yeah, it's accessible. You can climb stairs, right? And I'm like, well, that's not the definition of what accessibility is. But everyone has their own idea and their own interpretation of that word. And sometimes in different countries, different assumptions are made based on what that means. So I've learned to be very, very specific when saying these are what my needs are. Can you accommodate me?
Yeah, those are two really great tips there. So for anyone listening who this applies to, Google Street View is your friend. Look around, see what you can see, and be as specific as possible when you're sort of emailing, contacting people, asking about accessibility. There's really good tips there. Okay, now I love a good goal, and you have a great one. So far, you've traveled to 20 countries across 4 continents, including Antarctica, which is amazing. And your goal is to visit all 7 continents by the end of 2026. So can you tell me a bit about this, why you want to do it, and which continent is next?
Yeah, so I have always loved traveling, and I want to stay as much as possible. I'm a very stubborn person, so I really try not to let my disability hold me back, no matter how challenging that can be at times. But yeah, I just have really wanted to see the world. That started with my first international trip was actually to the UK. So that kind of fed my love of travel, and I caught the travel bug, and I said, okay, I want to see it all. I believe there's one other wheelchair user that I know of that has done all 7 continents. So I want to be right up there, with that person, and just be like, yes, I've literally traveled the world. My next continent is going to be Africa next year.
Nice, nice. I hadn't been to Africa until the start of this year, and I went to South Africa, so that was the first time I'd been there. And yeah, so beautiful. So when you said you went to the UK first, whereabouts did you go?
So I spent 2 weeks taking the train. I had limited mobility back then, so I wasn't using a wheelchair, but I did have difficulty getting around. I went with one of my college friends, and we took 2 weeks, took the Eurorail all over England. We went up to Scotland, to Edinburgh, and so we were in London, we were in Canterbury, we were in York, all different places in London and the UK. And it was just a blast. I love the history, I love the architecture, and yeah, it was just amazing.
Oh, great. Those are some great places to go to as well. I love York and Edinburgh, and London obviously has so much stuff to do, so amazing. Okay, so you say that traveling helped you become more confident in yourself, which I love because that's exactly the kind of thing I talk about on this podcast all the time. So can you tell me more about this? How in particular has it helped you to boost your confidence?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was younger, I was always kind of a shy person with my disability. And I think it's just really brought me out of my shell. For one, like when you see more things across the globe and you kind of just become more accepting of yourself and realize, hey, I'm not the only one with a disability. There is a community, and there are these great places you can go, but I think just the normal challenges of traveling is never goes 100% smoothly for anyone. But then when you have a disability, there's a possibility of more things getting kind of going wrong. So when I show up to a hotel and they say, oh yeah, that accessible room you booked, we don't have that anymore. And you have to problem solve and you have to think about, okay, what are my options? You have to advocate for yourself and say, well, that's not acceptable. This is what I booked. This is what I called to confirm. And, there should be a system in place where you get the room you reserve. So, you have to really think of, okay, well, what are the options? What are we going to do to solve this? Because this isn't going to work. I think the more you're put in that situation where you have to think on the fly, you become more confident of, okay, I've got this. I can handle this. I've got ideas for future if this should happen again, or I made it through and maybe it didn't go 100% smoothly, but I'm still living to tell about it. And, you realize what your abilities are rather than just focusing on what your disabilities are.
Do you want to learn all about the 5 travel transformation principles, including how to conquer your fears through travel? Then you need to grab a copy of my Travel Transformation Guide, written by me, Jessica Grace Coleman, as part of my Flip the Script Academy. It's totally free. All I ask for in exchange is your email address so I can keep you updated on all things travel and transformation. Just head to traveltransformationcoach.com/free guide to get your guide today. And now, let's get back to the Travel Transformation podcast. Yeah, that's such a great point about the problem solving and how having to problem solve, it sort of teaches you what to do next, what to do in the future if it happens again, but it also teaches you to stand up for yourself, like you said. It's teaching you about what you can actually achieve, even if it's not, like going on a massive challenge, if it's just like asking for what you actually need, what you want, what you ordered, what you booked, because so many people just sort of let that stuff slide. But like you say, in your situation, you can't do that. So that will definitely help boost your confidence in all kinds of ways. So I love that aspect and that perspective on that. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit in the answer there, but you also say that travel has challenged you not to make assumptions about what is possible. So can you tell me a bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So when my health first worsened, so muscular dystrophy is a progressive disease, but I had more abilities when I was younger. So my health took a dramatic turn for the worst in 2017. That's when I became a full-time ventilator user. A lot of my abilities declined. And so I had this question of, is travel going to be possible now that I've lost some of my abilities? There really wasn't a lot of information on accessible travel at that point in time. So that's why I said we have come a ways, but we still have more to go. And just that period of time, there's a lot more information, accessible travel. But I had all these thoughts in my head of what's going to be possible. Am I ever going to travel again? What is that going to look like? Is it going to have the same rewarding experience? Is it going to be, meaningful in the same way? And that really changed. My parents recognized this need for travel in me. It's kind of like something just in your soul. And so they said, okay, we're going to go on a trip, and it's going to be a domestic trip, but we're going to go and we're going to see what's possible. So we went to one of the national parks in the United States, and it's called Acadia National Park in Maine. So it was close enough that we could drive home if we really needed to, but far enough away that it felt new and exciting. And so what I learned by that trip is that there are places that are accessible. And yes, it's going to look different, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to have the same impact and meaning that regular traditional travel has. So that really taught me of, okay, don't make assumptions about what's possible. Do the research, do the work, find out what's available, find out what you can do, and focus on that.
That's such a great idea. And so that was the test trip you took to see if it would work. Yeah, that's a really great idea. And I love New England, I love Maine, and I love national parks in America, but I've not been to that one, so I'll have to add that to my list. That sounds amazing. And you mentioned before with the continents, so you've been to Antarctica, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of people think of Antarctica as not being very accessible in general to anyone, because it's quite difficult to organize a trip there. So how did you do it? What did you do? How was it for you?
Yeah, so I took a cruise to Antarctica, and there's different types of cruises you can do. There's the expedition cruises where you get to step on land on the continent. Those really are not accessible because you have to take these little zodiacs ashore, and they're just not set up for wheelchairs. The type of cruise I did was one of the bigger major cruise lines. So like Holland America, Princess, Celebrity, they do what's called sail-by cruises. So they actually go to the Antarctic Peninsula, but instead of making a landing or allowing passengers to go offshore, they do scenic sailing in some of the bays and near land. So you're still seeing land. We saw penguins every single day we were down there. We saw whales, we saw killer whales, we saw all types of birds and, sea life. So that was like a seal. So I felt like I really got to have that experience, even though I didn't get to put a wheel or a foot on the continent. It was still a really great way to experience just the raw beauty and wildness that is down there. So I really enjoyed it.
That sounds amazing. I'm such an animal fan and wildlife fan. So like seeing all those animals in the wild over there, that would have been incredible. Great. Okay. So you have a website that we mentioned, your World on Wheels blog. Can you tell me what it is, who it's for, and what made you want to start it?
Yeah, so it is a wheelchair accessible travel blog. I do talk about limited mobility as well because I've been on both sides of that coin, but it's basically for people with mobility problems that still want to travel. And my goal was to get more information on accessible destinations and how to go there, what you can do there, because when my health changed, like I mentioned before, there wasn't a lot of information on that. So I really wanted to be part of that change and provide that information and that resource to people, because I know what travel means to me, and I want others to be able to follow their dreams the same way I have. So that was really the goal behind it. When you go on the website, you'll see all these destinations that I've been to, and I read about the accessibility, what you can do, how to get there, what some of the challenges are, because I think it's really important to be honest about that balance of, it may be accessible for some, but not everyone. What are the resources out there to help you travel to those destinations? So yeah, that was really my goal and what I wanted to accomplish with that website.
That's such a great idea, and putting all your experience into your blog that people can go on and like benefit from your past trips and your tips and all that kind of stuff. That's great. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. I also believe you've started organizing wheelchair accessible small group tours to some pretty incredible places. Is that right?
I did. So our first group tours are happening next year. And the reason I started that is what I was hearing from people is just how overwhelming all the planning can be and all the research can be, and they don't know where to start. And sometimes accessible travel is expensive. It is at least twice the cost of traditional travel, so it's not always the most affordable. So I wanted to look at how do I make accessible travel more affordable. And if you're using adapted vehicles and specialized companies, the more you can share that across a number of people, the more that cost breaks down and becomes more manageable. So that was the other reason I started it. So next year in March, we are going to Peru and Machu Picchu. And in September, we're doing a safari in South Africa.
Wow, amazing. That's such a great idea to help keep the costs down, help with the logistics and everything that people might find overwhelming or daunting. Can I ask, how does the Machu Picchu thing work? Do you get driven to the spot, or because I know, it's a sort of renowned hard place to get to as well?
Yeah, so we're using a local company to Peru that specializes in accessible travel, and they carry like portable ramps because to get to Machu Picchu, you have to take a train up the mountain, and that train is not accessible. So between the ramps and lifting, they help you board the train and then the bus, the train station to the site, and then when you get to the site, obviously it's on the side of a mountain. So it's not really what one would imagine as being accessible. They have these specialized adapted wheelchairs that have one wheel on them, and there's the wheels like in the center of the chair, and then there's bars coming off so that they balance you and kind of navigate you around. But because it only has one wheel, it's easier to navigate over rougher terrain.
Wow, I did not know those existed, the one wheel wheelchairs. That's such a good idea. Great. Okay. So we mentioned there how overwhelming all the logistics and all the Googling and how time consuming and everything that is. But can you maybe, if someone's listening to this podcast, they're a wheelchair user and they want to travel, but they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed by the whole idea, not just the planning, like the actual going, if they don't think they're confident enough, they don't think they can do it. What would you say to them? What kind of advice would you give to them?
I would say start out small, start out near your hometown and where you live, do day trips or do things like that to help build your confidence, because essentially that's what I did in my own life as well. I think the more confident you get and the more you see what's out there, the more helpful it's going to be, the more willing you're maybe to take the next risk. But I will also say, and this is new, you don't know about this yet, I have heard so many people in this position. So one of the things I am doing right now is I am actually organizing and going to be hosting an online accessible travel summit. And we're going to have so many speakers talking about dealing with anxiety during travel. We're going to have people talking about how to fly with mobility devices, accessible cruising. We're going to be talking about traveling with service dogs. We have all these amazing speakers that are going to give you information and resources to help make this process easier. So whether you're newly disabled or have been disabled, but just new to that idea of traveling, we want to really just give you those tools and that confidence a little bit by meeting other people in the similar position and getting that information. Where can you go? What is it going to be like? Who can you follow on social media to see what they're doing? And maybe they are similar situation to what you have. So that's going to be coming up in November. I do not have set dates yet because I'm still finalizing speakers and all that kind of thing. But if you want to stay updated with that conference, please just sign up for my email list on my website because I'll be giving all the details and updates there.
That's amazing. That's such a good idea to do the summit, have everything in sort of one place. People can just go there, get all the information they need, get the inspiration they need, the motivation they need to actually go out there and do it. That's so great. Okay, so I asked you what your favorite places in the world are. We've already talked about Antarctica, but you also said Italy and Alaska. So can you tell me about those and why those places are so special to you?
Yeah, so Italy has a special place in my heart because it was the first bucket list destination that I kind of had, right? For some reason, and I don't know why, ever since I was young, I was like, I want to go. I want to go to Italy. I want to go to Italy. I want to have all the food. I want to see the sights, the Colosseum and things like that. I actually made that trip happen in 2008. I went with my best friend and we spent 2 weeks across Rome, Florence, and Venice. And it was one of those trips that, sometimes you want to go to a destination and you build it up so much in your head of this is what it's going to be like. And I wasn't sure what would happen if it was going to meet my dreams and what I had in my head. And it did. It met every expectation. The people are so friendly and so nice. The food is amazing. The sights and just the beauty of the country. It is also where I challenged myself to climb the Duomo in Florence. So if you are familiar with the Duomo, it has 463 stairs to get to the top. And obviously right now I cannot do stairs. When I was younger, I could, although they were still extremely difficult for me. So I trained in the gym for a year before that trip so that I would be able to do that, because I heard the view from the top was fantastic. And I was like, I'm going to see it, darn it. I'm going to do it. So my best friend helped me because the staircase is really, really narrow. The stairs are pretty steep in some sections. So I went early in the morning and I tried to get it when it was less crowded. Whenever I could, whenever it was wide enough, I would let people pass me because I'm slow when I climb stairs and I didn't want to pull people up. And I was a little worried about how they would react, right? Because sometimes when we travel, we're not always in the best mood, right? Depending on what else has happened in our trip and frustrations. And so that was probably my biggest concern. And they were so supportive and nice. They were like, you can do this. And if you can do this, I can do this. And when we got to the top, there's actually, it's almost like a ladder you climb, because you climb out through the floor in the top of the Duomo. And everyone I had let pass was there by the time I got there, and there was no railing. So I was having a hard time climbing the last like 2 rungs of the ladder, and they tried to grab my hands and just help pull me up through. And then they all started clapping and cheering me on because I got to the school and I accomplished it. And it was just a really emotional experience, but it was also a really connected experience because these were perfect strangers I was never going to see again in my life. And we all shared in this moment because we all accomplished the same goal. So I think that's why Italy is so special to me, because of that experience and just being able to say I did something on my bucket list, I accomplished it. What's next? So that for sure. I think Alaska, like you, I love wildlife, so that was a huge destination for wildlife and for mountains, and I just really enjoyed that experience as well.
I love that. I can just picture the scene in Italy as well, climbing the stairs and then getting up there and everyone helping you and clapping. I talk about magical movie moments like when we're traveling in my content, and that sounds like something like a scene right out of a movie. Like, it sounds amazing. So no wonder you have that as one of your favorite places. That's amazing. Okay, so I have 2 last quick questions. First of all, where can people find and follow you online if they want to look at your blog, if they want to sign up to your mailing list that you mentioned? And is there any last message you want to get across before we go?
Yeah, so worldonwheelsblog.com is the website. I am also pretty active on Facebook. The page is just World on Wheels. If you search that, I'll come right up. But I also have links to my social media account on my website, so you can easily find me that way. And then, yeah, my last advice is just don't be afraid to take healthy risks and challenge yourself. That is what helps build your confidence as a traveler. It is also some of the most rewarding experiences because that's what changes you as a person. All those little moments during your travels, and to say, okay, I wasn't sure, but I tried and I did it, or I tried and I failed and I still survived, and I've learned things for the next time I want to try. You know, no matter what the outcome is, taking those healthy risks can be so rewarding and so meaningful that really is going to make a difference.
That's great. I could not agree more. That's the perfect place to end this podcast episode. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Travel Transformation Podcast with me, Jessica Grace Coleman. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could please subscribe, rate and review, and spread the word, because it's my mission to help as many people as possible to flip the script on their lives and transform through travel. And remember, life is short, so let's make sure it's nothing short of amazing. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.